Chapter 10. Claire pulled into the hospital's circular drive, tires sliding on black ice as fat snowflakes cascaded from the pitch-black sky. The wind howled around the Bronco, making it groan like an old ship at sea. She shifted into a park with shaking hands and peered at Autumn slumped in the passenger seat. Autumn's jaw was still clamped at an impossible angle, her face twisted into a half-grimace, half-scream that never fully emerged. The fury and fear warring in her chest roared louder than the storm outside. "We're here," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. She reached over and gently unclasped the seatbelt. "Glenview Memorial, okay? They'll fix this." Autumn moaned, eyes shining with tears. Her neck muscles jerked again as though pulled by invisible wires. The unnatural tension in Autumn's body left her arms clenched close to her chest, fingers crooked like claws. Through the swirling snow, a row of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the hospital's sliding doors. She bolted from the driver's side and nearly fell on the slick pavement. Her breath formed frantic clouds as she hurried around to the passenger side and wrenched the door open. Each second of delay felt like a lifetime. Autumn's face was rigid with agony, tears coursing down her cheeks. As she slipped a trembling hand under Autumn's knees while the other braced her back. "I'm so sorry," Claire whispered, hoisting Autumn out. The wind ripped across her arms, stinging like tiny knives. Over Autumn's shoulder, she glimpsed a large crow perched on the hospital sign, its black shape a silent silhouette against the swirling snow. Inside the ER vestibule, the automatic doors hiss open, releasing a blast of overheated, stale air laced with chemical disinfectant. A few people in threadbare coats lingered near the triage counter. 2 children, one coughing, hovered close to their mother, who kept a suspicious eye on everyone who approached. Another man scratched at a bandage on his arm with a haunted look that made her skin crawl. The place reeked of disinfectant layered over sour body odor, with despair steeped under fluorescent lights. A triage nurse, whose name badge read Paxton, stood behind the counter with slumped shoulders. Her expression was vacant, as though half awake behind tired eyes. She caught sight of Autumn's contorted body in her friend's arms, but the nurse's face showed little alarm. "You'll need to sign in," Paxton droned, her monotone so absent of life that any DMV clerk would be envious. She clenched her jaw and spoke to the nurse as she signed the forms. "She's in severe distress. Look at her face. We need help right now." Paxton blinked slowly. "You're in an emergency room, ma'am. Everyone here needs help right now. I can take vitals," she offered, as if reading from a script. "Then you can wait in the lobby until called." Before there was room to argue, another nurse swept in, tall and gaunt with limp gray hair pinned under a sagging cap. She wore no visible name badge. Something about her eyes were off, glassy and dead, like she was looking through Claire rather than at her. "Let me," the nurse said in a low, scratchy voice. This gaunt nurse wordlessly guided them to a nearby dirty hospital wheelchair. Autumn let out a whimper, her limbs still jerking. "We've had a busy night," the nurse murmured, "but we'll get to you eventually." "Eventually?" Claire repeated in disbelief. "She's in agony." The nurse just nodded and rolled the screaming Autumn to a triage station, then checked her temperature. "Vitals are fine. Has she been using drugs?" the nurse said at last, snapping the thermometer away. Claire stammered while rubbing Autumn's back. "No, just her prescriptions." The nurse mumbled. "Sit with the others." She pointed to a half-full waiting area beyond a plexiglass divider. Autumn's twisted mouth quivered with every breath. One side of her face was so contorted the skin looked stretched taut, veins bulging in her temple. "She obviously isn't fine. She needs immediate care." But the nurse's dull eyes remained unwavering. She simply repeated, "A doctor will see her soon," then turned on her heel, shoes squeaking on polished tile. She vanished behind a coated door with a mechanical buzz. Claire swallowed a surge of anger and despair. "Come on," she whispered, pushing Autumn's wheelchair towards a cluster of plastic seats. "We'll figure this out." They settled near a flickering TV, the screen showing an infomercial for a miracle blender. The volume was muted, but she could see a woman beaming on screen, her teeth impossibly white and symmetrical. In the TV's reflection, a crow seemed to hover behind them, but when she twisted around there was nothing, just a wide hallway with posters reminding people to wash their hands. Autumn whimpered again, hands jerking rigidly. Claire knelt beside the wheelchair. "Hang in there," she murmured, tears stinging in her eyes. "I'm so sorry." She noticed a dark streak at the corner of Autumn's mouth, and Autumn coughed out something wet and red. Blood. Her heart lurched at the side. The relentless spasms must be biting into her cheeks or tongue. Her mind whirled. She tried to piece together what was happening. Was it a seizure? An allergic reaction? Some stray complication? She had no clue, and nobody here seemed to care. Hour after hour slid by with no relief. The minutes dragged on as she continuously went back and forth between her screaming friend and the triage desk, as well as the nurse's station beyond the double doors. The hush of the snowstorm outside was replaced by the hush of institutional indifference. One by one, the other patients disappeared, either admitted or discharged. Occasionally, an orderly or nurse came out calling a name. None of those names were Autumn. Over the next hours, the seats emptied. Autumn's tortured posture never eased. Twice, Claire begged the triage nurse for help, only to receive the same line. "The doctor will call you soon. We're understaffed tonight." The gaunt nurse from before occasionally passed by, never glancing at them. Each time she felt her skin crawl, as if something cold and watchful hovered behind that nurse's eyes. Somewhere around hour 3, Autumn hacked up another mouthful of blood-tinged saliva, her jaw yanked to the side so hard a small tooth cut into her lip. Claire was dizzy with blind rage. Her mind searched for any options, any sense of control in this cruel and uncaring desperation. Police sat near the automatic sliding doors to the ER, and she considered stealing one of their guns to force these people into helping her friend. She pleaded with Paxton again, voice shaking, but the nurse only handed her a flimsy tissue. After 5 excruciating hours, the waiting room was nearly empty. Some overhead lights had been switched off, giving the space a dim, unsettling hush. Snow battered the windows, shifting into ghostly shapes. Autumn's mouth was still horribly contorted, and every sob tore at Claire's heart. She felt useless, angry, and terrified. At that point, she sank into a corner chair, dragging out her phone with trembling hands. She typed frantic keywords: extreme jaw spasm, face locked, painful muscle contractions. Then she saw a Reddit link. Acute dystonic reaction from certain meds. Another page mentioned Reglan. She froze, recalling the new prescription Autumn had received for GI issues. The screen displayed horrifying images of people in contorted and unnatural poses, jaws twisted sideways, eyes rolling back. Claire's breath caught. "Oh God," she whispered. "It's the Reglan." She felt a surge of hope that this was treatable. A simple IV push of Benadryl or benztropine was listed as the standard remedy. She stared around the empty waiting room, despair mingling with fury. They'd wasted 5 hours already while Autumn screamed, and the solution was so simple, yet no one approached them with any medication. Claire tried flagging down a young, tired-looking man in wrinkled scrubs. "It's Reglan," she said, voice hoarse. "She needs an IV push. This is an easy fix for you guys. You could even do it out here in the waiting room, and it would take a few minutes, and you wouldn't even need a physician." A hospital staff member gave a shrug and stepped away, muttering something about waiting like everyone else. She wanted to scream and gouge these people's eyes out. Minutes crawled by, edging into more hours. A couple more names were called, none of them Autumn's. Outside the windows, the wind howled as the storm worsened. The overhead lights flickered. She caught sight of the gaunt nurse standing at the far end of the desk, eyes fixed on the exit doors. She couldn't shake the feeling that the nurse wasn't entirely human. By hour 7, Autumn's breath came in ragged bursts, tears slipping silently from the corners of her red, bloodshot, and swollen eyes. Claire sat on the floor beside the wheelchair, her phone battery blinking at 1%. "They'll help us," she kept whispering. "I'm sure." But no one came. Eventually, 8 hours after their arrival, the ER had grown quiet. Dawn threatened at the edges of the dark sky. Autumn's spasms began to subside on their own, leaving her jaw less contorted, though she trembled constantly. She signed the word home and stared forward blankly. Claire's anger and exhaustion were past breaking. She lifted her eyes to see the gaunt nurse appear yet again, face empty, posture slack. "No open rooms," the nurse said in that same scratchy monotone, as if reading from a cue card. "You can keep waiting or leave." She sat on the floor and stared up at the nurse, something cold and furious blazing in her chest. "We've been here all night. She's been screaming in agony. We told you, it's a reaction to Reglan." The nurse barely blinked. Autumn caught her caretaker's hand and signed home again. Claire felt her throat tighten and she signed back, "Okay." Autumn nodded tearfully. "It's morning," Claire muttered, raw bitterness in her voice. We made it all night without a single real intervention. You're starting to do better because your body can metabolize Reglan faster than this hospital can process patients. Her eyes stung as she saw the sunlight filtering through a narrow window, snow still drifting outside. Fine, she said to the nurse. We're leaving. The nurse acted like she didn't hear anything. She picked Autumn up and carried the limp pile of pained exhaustion to the Bronco. Maybe she was going crazy because it felt like the whole world was in a crazed, shared delusion, and only a crazy person would think everyone else is crazy. Autumn went to the ER for help, and all she received was disdain and indifference. At the exit, the sliding doors parted with a hiss. Snow still drifted across the lot, which was only half cleared. Dawn was finally creeping over the horizon, painting the sky a thin gray. In the half-light, the hospital sign loomed overhead, and the same crow perched silently on top, feathers puffed against the cold. Its black eyes glinted as Claire passed by, and for one heartbeat she saw something swirling in its pupils, a burning. Then she blinked, and it was again only a bird. They reached the Bronco. Autumn again weakly signed home. She nodded fiercely, eyes burning with fatigue. Yes, she said, voice rough. Home. In the passenger seat, Autumn let out a last trembling sob, relief mingling with despair. She stared at the dark hospital facade one final time, feeling utterly defeated. She settled Autumn inside, then climbed into the driver's seat. The engine sputtered and finally caught. As she pulled out of the lot, Claire glanced in the rearview mirror. The hospital's ER sign glowed in the snow, taunting her. Under a broken street lamp, a tall shape stood motionless, though she couldn't see if it was a nurse or something else entirely. A prickle crawled along her spine. With a steadying breath, she turned onto the main road. She felt utterly empty and drained. The watchers, holy or fallen, real or metaphorical, felt like they'd feasted tonight, and nothing was left to devour. Claire rested one trembling hand on the wheel, and the other on Autumn's thigh. The Bronco rattled across the snow-crusted pavement, leaving Glenview Memorial behind. The memory of that gaunt nurse's hollow gaze and the hospital's unearthly hush lingered. They had survived this horror, but she knew that some shadows linger long after dawn. Shadows wait for the next unguarded moment. She kept her eyes on the road, swallowing fear that tasted like iron, determined to keep Autumn safe from all that lurked just beyond the fading night. The drive home was mercifully short, but it felt endless. When the Bronco finally groaned into their driveway, she helped Autumn inside. Her friend's face still twitched with lingering spasms, her jaw raw and bruised. Claire eased her down onto the worn sheets, tucking a blanket over her. Try to rest, she whispered, pressing a trembling kiss to Autumn's forehead. Autumn signed a shaky, thank you, eyes full of deep exhaustion. She had never heard Autumn scream in pain. She was the toughest person Claire had ever known, and she'd been brutally torn apart that night. But she survived. Once Autumn was settled, Claire backed out of the room, every nerve in her body alive with anger and desperation. She felt tears threatening again, but refused to let them fall. Instead, she slipped outside into the cold dawn air, the wind biting her once again. The snow had slowed, leaving a thin blanket across the yard. She walked around the side of the house, heart pounding with each step, until she reached a rusted old garden statue that had belonged to her father, a symbol of half-baked meaning she had always despised. It stood about waist-high, shaped like some lopsided angel. Claire glared at its chipped wings and hollow eyes. Without a word, she grabbed the small sledgehammer leaning against the fence. Her breath came in ragged bursts, clouds of steam in the dawn light. Then she swung. The hammer struck the statue with a dull crack, knocking off one of the wings. Another swing, and a chunk of the angel's face crumbled away, revealing hollow stone beneath. She kept going, each blow fueled by fury at the hospital, at her father, at the watchers and angels, and a world so cruel. At last, when the statue lay in shattered pieces, Claire stood, gasping with the weight of her pain. She was unable to see through her tears and mucus pouring out her nose. She let the hammer drop to the frozen ground, and then let herself do the same.